Welcome to the second summer session at ACC and to a course known as Human Growth and Development. A course that I like to affectionately refer to as womb-to-tomb psychology. And that's because it's a study of human development from conception until death. If you were to take a look at the opening paragraph of your course syllabus, you'll discover that it's a survey of the physical, cognitive, emotional, and social factors in human development from conception until death. There will be an emphasis on understanding people at various ages of development in order to be more patient with them and to interact with them more effectively. The course is especially well suited for individuals who want to go into the helping professions, education, healthcare-related professions, and so on. I'd like to begin by, since this is kind of a study of a group of people or even an individual's development throughout the lifespan, I thought I would share some things about myself with you to get started so that you know where I'm coming at when it comes to teaching this course. I'm known around ACC as being someone who brings real-life examples to back up everything that we study. You know, so many textbooks and things like that are written by professors who maybe have never been clinicians in the field of psychology and so on. The books might be filled with examples they've heard about or made up. But everything that we study in here, I will back up with a real-life example. And I think that'll help make the course come alive for you. So let me do a little kind of developmental thing of my own career, if you will, to see where I'm coming at in teaching the course. And my whole life, almost every job I ever had involved working with people. And I'll start by saying one of the earliest jobs that I had was as a youth worker at the YMCA. I grew up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, which is a city of about 42,000, something like that. I think in the county there's maybe 100,000 people. And I, throughout high school, was a youth worker at the YMCA. The summer before I started college, I was a teacher's aide at an elementary school. I assisted teaching science courses to students in grades 2 through 6. I went off to college at Baylor University, where I earned 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's degree with a major in sociology and a minor in psychology. And then I have a master's degree in educational psychology. And then I have a doctorate with a major in educational psychology and a minor in elementary education. So going back, my first summer between my freshman and sophomore years of college, I went home to Wisconsin and I was a playground director. Scattered throughout the city of Fond du Lac were playgrounds. Some of them were in parks, some of them were at school grounds. And it just so happened the one I was assigned to was probably the most popular one in town. At any given moment, we had as many as 600 children and adolescents that we engaged in various types of play activities. The playgrounds were open in the summertime from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. And, we did things like we competed against other playgrounds in things like softball and track and so on. And, we had handicrafts for kids, and we played table games with the kids, etc., etc. What a great job, 9 in the morning till 9 at night, and all I did was play with kids and teenagers all day. So that was another position I had, working with people, if you will. The following summer, I stayed in Waco and took classes. And that summer, I had a roommate from Austin. And at one point, we were out of food and out of money. And he said this would be a good weekend to go visit my parents. And so I came down here to Austin for the first time and fell immediately in love with Austin. I said, boy, that's where I'd like to live someday. And so that was kind of my goal as I continued my education, was to eventually settle in Austin. As an undergraduate, I took a social work course where you earned credit for doing community volunteer work, and I ended up volunteering to be the physical education teacher at an entire school that was nothing but kindergarten children. And I had already had all this experience as a youth worker at the YMCA, and also as a teacher's aide at an elementary school. And so this seemed like a good fit for me. The following summer, the Waco ISD really liked what I was doing with the kids at this elementary school, and so they paid me to continue my work that summer. And I'll never forget that summer. I think it was the hottest summer I ever experienced in Texas. It was as hot or hotter than the summer we're having here in Austin this year. I remember many days when it was like 110 degrees. And I don't think the building was even air conditioned. It took some real stamina. And of course, I was spending most of my time outside playing games with the young children. After I finished my bachelor's degree, and I was working on my on my master's degree in educational psychology, I managed to land a graduate assistantship where I was a professor's assistant. And because I had a fair amount of experience working with young kids, they made me the graduate assistant to the head of the early childhood program at Baylor. And so I assisted her in teaching mainly educational psychology courses to future kindergarten teachers. And I enjoyed that a lot. While I was working on my doctorate, I taught undergraduate courses. One in particular was called Educational Psychology for Elementary Teachers, and that course was very similar to this course that you're taking right now. Because I had been involved in the early childhood department, I also was assigned to teach a seminar in student teaching and to supervise kindergarten student teachers. And over a 2.5-year period, I supervised over 200 kindergarten student teachers. This was while I was working on my doctorate. when you're working on a doctorate, you have to do a dissertation. And everybody dreams of doing some earth-shattering study that will revolutionize the field. But in the end, you do whatever the chair of your dissertation committee tells you to do. And in my case, I was told, no one's ever done a dissertation involving kindergartens. And so I ended up doing this study of the roles of paraprofessionals, teacher aides, in other words, in kindergartens. And so that was what my dissertation was on. My first real position as a psychologist after graduate study, I was a school psychologist for the Education Service Center Region 12 in Waco. The only doctoral level school psychologist serving 81 school districts in 12 counties, if you can imagine. I'd get up in the morning, I'd drive 50 or 60 miles out to some little town and give a few IQ tests and things like that, maybe test children for learning disabilities and so on. That wasn't my idea of being a school psychologist. And so I kept applying for positions other places, and I eventually landed a position in the Austin Independent School District as a school psychologist. And I did that for the next 8 years. So 1 year as a school psychologist in Waco, followed by 8 years here in Austin. Every year I was assigned 3 or 4 school buildings, typically an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. I spent a couple of years as the school psychologist at LBJ High School. I spent 5 years as the school psychologist at Austin High School. I always like to say the only school I survived the whole 8 years at was Oak Hill Elementary. And I like to say I survived 3 different principals. If you get into the world of education, principals often like to be their own little kings and queens. And they like everything to be done their way. In fact, if you're a school psychologist, you'll discover everybody wants to be your boss. Every building you walk into, they want you to do something different than they did in some other building. I think my favorite school I worked in during that whole time was Austin High, because they were a bunch of people that said, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Oh, wow, you can do anything. And they pretty much had me doing whatever I wanted to do. And that was wonderful. Whereas there were certain other schools, you'd walk in the door and all they wanted you to do was psychological testing, nothing else. Other places wanted you to do crisis interventions or counseling and things like that. Something I would tell you is that all psychologists eventually reach a point where they want to do things their own way, and they decide that they're going to start a private practice. And so I started a private practice part-time in the evenings, and I had a friend who was a gynecologist who let me use his office rent-free. So I started a private practice in psychology in a gynecology office, which was an interesting setting. There are all kinds of funny stories I could share about that experience. Eventually, and by the way, while I was a school psychologist for AISD, I supervised school psychology interns from the University of Texas at Austin and from Texas State University down in San Marcos. Well, while I was the school psychologist at Austin High, there was a student who was a very good student, but who was angry because although she had straight A's, she hadn't taken as many advanced placement classes or honors classes as some of the other students with those kind of grades. And so she was not going to be the valedictorian despite her impressive grade point average. This made her very mad, and she started sending death threats to the principal and to the assistant principal. In fact, the assistant principal's first name was Jack, and she sent him a poem one day that said, "Death be nimble, death be quick. Forget the candlestick, kill Jack." And then you always knew that these notes were from her because she had her own special logo that she would draw on top or on the bottom of the notes. And, you know, when you do that, you get to meet the school psychologist. And as you could probably predict, this young lady already had a psychiatrist on the outside, and so I started consulting with her psychiatrist, and we really hit it off, and he suggested maybe it would be more appropriate to move my private practice into his office, and so I did. You know, the neat thing about being a school psychologist is you get the summers off. And, you know, when I started the private practice, I would work like from 8 in the morning till about 4:30 in the afternoon for the school district. And then I'd go to my private office for a few hours. But in the summers, I could do the private practice full time. And so this particular psychiatrist I started officing with was actually the only child and adolescent psychiatrist on both the city and state's health plans. So we had a continual stream of lots of patients coming through the office from all walks of life. And he would often have me do batteries of psychological tests on various individuals, and inevitably, if I hit it off with the person, he'd say, "Why don't you go ahead and do the therapy too?" And a lot of psychiatrists are more into prescribing medications than they are into doing therapy and things like that. So suddenly I was extremely busy. The school district offered me a promotion, but it was going to mean working year-round for the school district, and I wasn't going to be able to maintain my private practice. So I resigned from the school district, and I went into full-time private practice, officing with this psychiatrist and actually another psychiatrist as well, and another psychologist. So, you know, in our group, we could treat almost anything that came in the door. And in fact, our receptionist was somebody who had been my administrative assistant for the school district. I lured her away, and she became our administrative assistant for our group. Well, this went on for a while, but eventually the psychiatrist, who loved being a psychiatrist, but he hated dealing with insurance companies, an opportunity came along for him to move to Dallas and be chief psychiatrist at a psychiatric hospital, chief psychiatrist for an adolescent unit at this hospital. And so he moved to Dallas. He tried to get me to come with him, but I wanted to stay in Austin. And so, you know, I continued on in private practice for a while, but then there was a large clinic in Dallas that opened a satellite clinic in Austin, and I eventually ended up merging my private practice with that large clinic. I became their chief psychologist, their director of intern training, and their director of testing. And this was a very big operation. We had over 50 professionals working at the clinic, about a half a dozen psychiatrists, similar number of psychologists, licensed professional counselors, clinical social workers, nurses. The clinic was so big that we had our own day hospital, and we had our own 20-bed inpatient unit at Shoal Creek Hospital. And during that time, I started every other weekend for 7 years. I led group psychotherapy in the hospital with the patients. I had already been doing a lot of hospital work initially when I worked for the school district. Whenever students were hospitalized, they would send me over there to consult. And then when I was officing with the child and adolescent psychiatrist, he had me doing a lot of hospital work as well. In fact, he assisted me in getting clinical privileges at all the local psychiatric hospitals. So again, I was quite busy. Two of the psychiatrists at the clinic were child psychiatrists. But one of them, another psychiatrist, specialized in geriatrics. And so he was forever having me go over to the geriatric unit at Shoal Creek Hospital and do things like dementia evaluations and so on. You know, evaluating people for cognitive decline and things like that. So, you know, basically I was doing psychology, practicing psychology with people throughout the lifespan, everything from preschoolers to senior citizens. And I bring a lot of that experience with me in teaching this lifespan psychology course that we're having. After 7 years at the clinic eventually got bought out by a chain of clinics that had its headquarters in California. They closed the Austin clinic, which had fallen into financial difficulties due to managed health care. I went back into private practice and I opened an office out in Westlake Hills. And it was maybe a year after that, an opportunity came along to start teaching classes at ACC, which I jumped at the chance. And after I had taught at ACC for about a year, an opportunity came along to also teach at St. Edward's University. So suddenly I found myself doing full-time private practice while teaching multiple courses at ACC and at St. Ed's. Everything from counseling to psychological testing to child psychology, adolescent psychology, social psychology, abnormal psychology, you name it. It got to the point where I was so busy teaching that I hardly had any time to do my private practice, and I had, pretty much relegated it to Fridays. And then an opportunity came along to work at ACC full-time, half-time counseling and advising students in what then was called the Office for Students with Disabilities. Today we call it Student Accessibility Services. So I was working in SAS half-time and then teaching half-time. And this was mainly at the Rio Grande campus. That's where I was doing all the counseling and advising. So all in all, I've been connected with ACC now for 26 years. Uh, and so, that's a long time, over a quarter of a century. And I've got, many, many more years than that clinical experience. I think if you've been adding up all the totals, you probably concluded I'm 100 years old, but I'm not anywhere near that yet. I was always, most of my career, the young doctor. Now I'm the grandfather figure, I guess. And I would add that experience into my experience in working with people, by the way. I have 2 adult children, and I have 3 grandchildren. So I've got experience as a psychologist, as a youth worker, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a Little League baseball coach, you name it. I've had lots and lots of experience working with people throughout the lifespan. So I've told you some things about myself. When you're finished watching the orientation, please send me an email and introduce yourself to me. This is how I basically can report to everybody that you're checked in and are actively taking the course. I have no other way to really do that. And tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up. Some of you may not be originally from Austin. Tell me a little bit about your major, what your career goals are, what you like to do for fun. Tell me some things so I can get to know you better. Summer school moves really fast. I've always enjoyed taking summer school as a student, and I've always enjoyed teaching summer school as a professor. Although I have to admit, when I was a student, in the summer, I often signed up for classes that I didn't really want to take, but I thought, I can stomach it for 6 weeks. I'm hoping that's not why you took this course, but maybe for some of you, that's it. But as a professor, I've especially loved teaching summer school because in the classroom, it meets every day. And I've set the schedule up in your course syllabus as if the course meets every day. In that, I would hope that you would be studying things daily in order to keep up with the extremely fast pace of the summer course. In fact, I'm recording this video on the last day of the first 5 weeks, and I can't believe how fast it went. I was teaching Intro to Psych at that time, and it seems like I just did this video for that course yesterday, and yet today's the last day already. So you have to really maintain self-discipline in a summer class in order to keep up with the pace. Let's take a look at the syllabus. And the textbook is by Kathleen Berger. It's called The Developing Person Through the Lifespan. It's the 11th edition. I know Kathleen Berger. She's a delightful individual. She's a fantastic teacher. She's actually a professor at the Bronx Community College in New York. I've had dinner with her a number of times, and she's absolutely marvelous. I think you'll like the textbook. But a warning, the textbook is a very comprehensive textbook and covers virtually everything you could want to cover in a lifespan psychology course. And so, there's no way we can study everything in that book. So there may be, you might want to hang on to the book because there may be topics that eventually you'll be able to apply to your own life and your own career. But be aware that we won't study everything in the book. As far as the course requirements are concerned, read the textbook, but you only need to read things in the textbook that are associated with learning objectives that begin on page 5 of your course syllabus. One pet peeve I had as a student was I was never very good at outguessing professors regarding what in the book was important to know and what maybe didn't matter. I've taken the guesswork out of this for you. You know, I would, when I was a student, I'd underline stuff and I'd write notes in the margins and put little asterisks next to things I thought were especially profound. And then none of that was on the tests. That will not happen in here. What's emphasized in the learning objectives and hence is emphasized in the course, in the audio lectures, the visual lectures, the handouts, and so on. Those are the things that will be emphasized on the test, not whatever you think you're trying to outguess me is important from the book. So before you read chapters, again, beginning on page 5 of your course syllabus, read the learning objectives for the chapter. And that way, when you read the chapter, if something you read is addresses one of the learning objectives, okay, that's the stuff to underline and write notes about and all that. Other things is for your own interest. But if you want to know what I hoped you'd get out of the chapter, it's the things that are in the learning objectives in this course syllabus, okay? Then the second thing that I want you to do is regularly check the announcements on Blackboard. And this is how I communicate with the class. Things I want you to be aware of, I will post an announcement about. If it's something I'm especially concerned about, I'll probably also follow it up with an email to everyone in the class. But during the regular term, maybe you only need to check the announcements weekly, but in the summer, you really need to check them daily because the course moves so fast. So please do that. Point number 3 on the front page of the syllabus is, again, I've mentioned it before, I'll say it again, exercise self-discipline. Try to keep pace with the suggested daily course timeline. And this, of course, begins on page 4 and goes on to page 5 of the course syllabus. So, I've got it set up so you may be watching this early or you may be watching it late, but ideally you should have watched this orientation video on Tuesday, July the 5th. Because then on Wednesday, July the 6th, we'll begin our study of human development. And you can see on the daily outline what textbook chapters and what topics you should be studying. I will make various topics available in clusters, and I won't just follow day by day, but in the beginning here, for example, I will make available all of the topics to be studied on Blackboard that are covered in the first exam. And so, this is the study of human development, It's a review of theories of development that you may or may not have studied in Intro to Psych, heredity and environment, that topic, and then finally slides on prenatal development and birth. So all that information, all those topics will be made available at once. Some people will move at a faster pace than others, but please try and keep pace, okay? If you take a look at page 2 of the course syllabus, I will have office hours on Monday evenings from 7 until 8 o'clock. And those office hours are on Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So, if you need to chat about anything on Mondays between 7 and 8 o'clock at night, I'll be available to field questions, interact with students, and so on. If that time doesn't work for you, shoot me an email, and we'll work out a time that works for both of us, and we'll meet on Blackboard Collaborate Ultra that way. My email address is also there, dgran, D-G-R-A-N, at austincc.edu. And again, I want you to send me an email soon introducing yourself. And that way I know you're attending and eager to get going. Okay? The next thing I want to mention here are tests. And there will be 4 tests. They are multiple choice, maybe a few true-false items, but mainly multiple choice. They're taken on Blackboard. They're open book, open notes. But please don't think they're things you can not study all the topics that are posted on Blackboard and then just look up the answers to. That won't work. I'm into writing test questions. I've had at least a half dozen courses in test construction. I don't use test banks or things like that. As a matter of fact, I've written the test banks for some of the major textbook authors that are out there. And more of my test items are at the higher levels of thinking. When it comes to testing, there's a thing that we call Bloom's taxonomy, which has 6 levels to it, but I mainly focus on the first 3, which are knowledge, comprehension, and application. A knowledge level test item would be simply something like knowing a fact or a definition or something like that. A comprehension level question would be something like, can you pick out an example of something? And an application level question would be, can you take what you've been studying and apply it to a new situation to make a prediction? I try to have most of my test questions at the comprehension and application levels, so these aren't just things you can look up. So you need to thoroughly study all the different modules. Before each test, I will also post on Blackboard test review questions so that and these come right out of the test. So if you want to know what to study for the test, study the test review questions. I will also host a live test review session that will be recorded on Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And the review session typically will be the day before or right before the test is made available. If you look at your course syllabus, the first test will be made available on Tuesday, July the 12th. You will have maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 days to complete the test online. Notice the deadline for completing test 1 is Saturday, July the 16th. So you've got 4 days to get it done. Test 2 is scheduled to be available Wednesday, July 20th, and it must be completed by Monday, July 25th. Test 3 will be available Saturday, July 30th, and it must be finished by Thursday, August 4th. And then the last test, which by the way is not a comprehensive final, it's just test 4 over the last group of topics that we study. It'll be available on Saturday, August the 6th, but it must be completed by Monday, August the 8th, which is the last day of the semester. So there's no reason not to do well in the tests. They're open book, open notes. So you can go back and review lectures and all that sort of thing. You'll have test review questions. I'll do an online recorded test review session. I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't do well on tests, but there are people who don't. Not in this course, but there are in Intro to Psych for sure. Most of the students taking this course are a little bit older. They tend to be more serious students. A lot of them are heading for careers in healthcare and so on, trying to get in a competitive program. And so, generally speaking, there are a lot of very outstanding students taking human growth and development. There will also be a bonus essay question for each test. And that bonus essay question I will email to everyone. It'll be worth an extra 5 points added onto your test score. Now, this is not extra credit. Extra credit is things that some teachers offer to students that are in the hole and are trying to catch up. I don't offer extra credit. This is bonus points. And consequently, if you choose to respond to a bonus essay question, it must be typed and it must be emailed as an attachment to me before you take the test or at the time you take the test and you submit the test for scoring. This isn't something that, you look at your score and you go, oh, I could use some more points. I think I'll do it now. That's not what this is about. There are people that prefer essay questions, so I like to throw some in where you can earn some bonus points. And so that's what that's all about. Responses to bonus essays must be typed. And again, emailed to me as an attachment. Okay? I've set the testing up to where you can see what you missed and what the right answer is after the test deadline. So once everyone in the class has technically finished the test, then you can see your actual test. I try to make this class as close to an actual classroom course as possible. And in the classroom, everybody takes the test on the same day and they all get it back on the same day. So that's why you can't see what you missed until after the deadline for taking the test. Let's see, is there anything else I need to say about testing? Oh, if you have an accommodation letter because you have a particular disability that requires you to have some kind of special accommodations for taking this course, and especially for testing, please see to it that I get your accommodation letter as soon as possible. Typically, the main accommodation students have needed is extra time on tests. Well, that's not an issue when you got several days. In the classroom, that might be an issue where, you can't complete it in an hour and a half. But, when you've got several days, extra time shouldn't be an issue for anyone. Okay. The other course requirement is that you need to read and write a book review on either a book that is directly related to developmental psychology or a book that is a biography or an autobiography about anybody. It doesn't have to be a biography about a psychologist or something like it. It could be about anybody. It could be about your favorite rock star. I love reading biographies. I read them all the time. People's lives are so fascinating. And a biography is essentially an account of somebody's lifespan. So, I would love to have you read that kind of a book. If you choose not to read something like that, then I want you to read a book that's directly related to developmental psychology. And more information about this assignment is located on, there's actually a tab in Blackboard about it, but also beginning on page 4 of your course syllabus. Book reviews over books related to developmental psychology should be one-page, single-spaced, typed, and it should include a bibliographic entry where you've got basically the author's name, the year the book was written, the title of the book, and the name of the publisher. Then there's a section on information about the author. I want to know how the author became an authority on this topic. Where has the author, for example, gone to school? Where have they studied? Where did they acquire this knowledge? Where have they worked? That sort of thing. How did the author become an authority on this topic? There's too many books out there by authors that really don't have, they're kind of self-appointed experts on things. I don't want you to read one of those kind of books. For example, I've banned Men from Mars, Women Are from Venus. Dr. John Gray, who had a mail-order doctorate from somewhere in Canada, and wrote this book that's all his own opinion about things. You can't read a book like that. He's laughing all the way to the bank. He's made a lot of money selling these things. But, I want you to read something more scholarly than that. Look for a book that has an extensive bibliography in the back, an extensive list of references. Make sure the author has some bona fide credentials and is really an authority in this area. There's too many books out there of self-appointed experts who really aren't experts at anything other than marketing and making money. So I have to approve your book title. And the reason for that is I won't approve any title I don't think will get you a good grade. And everyone in the class has to read a different book. And so I will be posting on Blackboard a list of books that I've already approved. If a book's listed on that list, then you can't pick that. A classmate's already got it. So I need to approve the title. So information about the author, and then what was the thesis of the book? What are the main points of the book? And this isn't just a listing of topics or something like that. There's a sample report in your course syllabus. And, the sample report has bullets. Your report doesn't have to have bullets. It could have bullets, but it could be just paragraphs. But, what's the thesis? What are the main points that the author's trying to make? And then finally, your evaluation of the book. And by that, I mean, how did the author support or fail to support the main points? Was there a long list of references? Did they give case examples of people that they had worked with? Did they cite research studies that have been done and so on? I couldn't care less about authors' credentials because they've been on some talk show or something like that. Being an authority on something gets you onto a talk show. Being on a talk show doesn't make you an authority. So please don't, in the information about the author, please don't write that the person's been on Oprah or this is a bestseller on the New York Times list. That doesn't cut it. I want something more academic than that. If you want to read a book about differences between men and women, read something like The Female Brain by Lou Ann Brisendine. She's a professor, I want to say at Stanford or Berkeley or someplace like that. It's a little paperback, but half the book is a list of references. She's also written a book called The Male Brain. Well, these are the kinds of books I want you to read, not Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Read books related to developmental psychology that have some credibility to them. Okay? If you choose to do a biography or an autobiography for your book report, and again, it could be on anybody, well, then that report can be actually 2 pages long, single-spaced. And it will include, again, a bibliographic entry. And then there should be sections that highlight the life and career accomplishments of the person, the life setbacks and challenges the person faced, lessons that were conveyed to you by the person's testimony, your favorite snapshot of the person from the book, and then a brief ecological analysis that's based on Bronfenbrenner's model, which you'll be studying tomorrow, and then an evaluation of the book. So attached to that link on Blackboard about the book report, the book review, there are sample reports and sample grading forms that I use to grade these things extremely objectively. So certainly if you have any specific questions about the book report, feel free to email me. As far as grades are concerned, the book report counts the same as a test. So your grade in the course will consist of, if you look at the top of page 4 there, 4 tests plus the book report. So each test is worth 20% of your grade, and the book report's worth 20%. And if you look at the previous page, the grading key is 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, 70 to 79 is a C, 60 to 69 is a D, and less than 60 would be failing. Okay, and by the way, if you're on the line, I'll round grades up. I had somebody this summer said, my average is 89.75. I desperately need an A. I said, don't worry, 89.75 will get rounded up to 90. But if it was 88.75, you'd be out of luck. You can't round that up to 90. So if you're on the line, I'll round it up. Okay, after a test deadline, I will post class statistics, how everybody did, so to speak, on the announcements on Blackboard. And so you'll be able to compare your score to the distribution of scores, and you can see how you fit in. In this course, scores tend to be relatively high. Okay, let's see, what else might I need to cover here? On page 3, some more information about examinations and course grades. Of course, academic dishonesty will result in a failing grade on the assignment or test. And so, you have to watch out for things like collusion on tests. The tests are open book, open notes, but you cannot get together with another person in the class and say, well, you answer all the even ones and I'll do the odd ones. That's collusion, and if it were discovered you did something like that, you would get a failing grade on the thing. I've never really had big problems over the years with students cheating, but occasionally. It's usually kind of a dead giveaway when people make exactly the same score and they get exactly the same questions wrong and they put exactly the same wrong answers. That's usually a red flag, something's fishy here. But I trust that won't happen in this course. Also, you have to watch out for plagiarism. I've occasionally had a student buy a book report online. Years ago, I remember there was this one student I had in class, and I read his book report, and I thought, this is, he didn't write this. I called him into my office, and I said, you didn't write this. Oh, yeah, I did. Every word of it. It's all my own words. I went, well, here, move over here by my computer. I'll show you where the paper is online. He said, yeah, okay, I admit I didn't write it. I bought the paper online. I said, how much did you pay for it? He said, $30. I said, well, it's not even a good paper. You know, it's a C report, but now that I know you bought it, it's an F report. You know, if you're going to buy a report, at least buy an A report. This has happened every once in a while, but I will warn you, book reports will be submitted on Blackboard, and they go right into a screening program that screens reports for plagiarism and things like that. I'm happy to report I haven't caught any. So, you know, please don't do anything so foolish. Okay. As far as my teaching philosophy is concerned, I like to have a good time. I feel like if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, students aren't enjoying taking a course. So I like to have a lot of fun in the classroom, and online I do as good as I can. I try to make the online experience as close to a classroom experience as I possibly can. I like to infuse lectures with real-life examples of psychology and practice. I'm on page 2, by the way, of your course syllabus. I like to maximize the use of media to illustrate main points of discussion. So there'll be video clips to watch and audio clips to listen to and audio lectures and PowerPoints and all that sort of thing. It's not all just the same thing. I love a good debate. You know, this course, developmental psychology, is full of issues that some people think this, other people think that. And, you know, I like things to be open for discussion. There's, you know, I'm down at the bottom here, I say debates assume an environment of academic freedom. Input by students and faculty will likely reflect differing viewpoints. An honorable goal of higher education is to develop post-formal thought, which recognizes that one's own perspective is only one of many potentially valid views, and that life entails many inconsistencies. It also promotes dialectical thinking, which involves considering both sides of an idea simultaneously and then forging them into a synthesis of the original idea and its opposite. We'll be studying this particularly when we get to the stage of life that most of you are in, where we talk about cognitive development during emerging adulthood and adulthood. Hopefully I'll make the material relevant to your vocational and personal aspirations, and to identify how psychology permeates virtually every aspect of our lives. And I also like to emphasize research. You know, psychology is a science and a profession, but the profession of psychology would have no credibility without the science backing it up. And so I will emphasize research. Okay. I think I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to in the course syllabus. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me. And be sure and email me your personal introduction. Actually, I had a student last spring that did a video introduction. I was impressed. You know, it was only about 5 minutes long, but that was kind of a neat way to really get to know somebody when you're not actually in a classroom interacting with each other. Okay, I look forward to studying womb-to-tomb psychology with you.